Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. I'm Alora Murray.
And I'm Sarah Jenkins.
And today is so much fun. I have the opportunity, really an honor.
Really
the honor I get to sit down and talk to Sarah all about herself.
Boy, all about me. These are so awkward, by the way. So I just hope it's entertaining. But I feel like, we spend so much time together on the show and then the podcast that's like we're friends on and off, but it's weird to be interviewed. There's no way around it. So
Okay, Sarah, I did mine. It was a couple of weeks ago. Carrie interviewed me, and it is a little weird to have, the roles flipped essentially, because you're the one who usually does the interviewing, but now I get to interview you.
And I know you're going to do a great job and ask all the hard-hitting questions.
I am. Very deep, profound questions, starting off with, where are you from, Sarah?
Oh my God, I love it. Well, okay, so if you guys have watched us, I talk about my home town in Maryland quite a bit if you've ever caught our show. But I grew up in a suburb of Washington, D.C. It's called Rockville, Maryland. And I lived there till I was 18, and I went to college in Arizona. My parents were really upset, but I was just like, I want to be around palm trees. I want warm weather, mountains. And I actually chose where I went to school, ASU, like sight unseen, which is kind of crazy. But I've always just been kind of adventurous, and I like to try new things. And I just, for some reason, the mountains were calling my name. So
I love it. Well, I love the fact that you ended up going so far west, because I feel like that led you to us. But we'll get there in just a minute. Okay, growing up, you have two sisters, right?
I do. I'm the oldest. So I'm like fascinated by birth order. I think it's really interesting. Like when I talk to my friends, I'm always like, oh, I could tell you're the middle. Or it's just, I think it's so like, it's true when you like research it. But yeah, I'm definitely the oldest child, 3 girls. So I have 2 younger sisters, and one still lives in Maryland, like near my parents. The other lives in LA now. So it's hard being so far out, separated.
That is hard when your sibling lives far away from you. Okay. And you were actually homeschooled.
I
was not homeschooled, and I didn't really know anyone who was. So this is kind of new to me, but you tell us stories all the time. You're like, I don't really feel like I went to school till like junior high, and I walked in and was like, what in the world is going on?
Totally.
So talk to us about being homeschooled growing up.
Yeah. So I graduated in 2004, so it was right when the iconic movie Mean Girls came out. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's one of my favorites.
I would be surprised if someone hadn't, but there could be someone out there. But
on Wednesdays we wear pink. It's become such a part of like popular culture, but I love it. And the main character, Cady, she is homeschooled. Her parents, I think, are like paleontologists or something. They're very like scientific, and so the whole thing reminded me in that there's a scene where she goes into school, and it's like you wouldn't think about it if you're like most people who have gone to school K through 12, but like everything is new to her. Everything is foreign, and when you hear a bell, you freak out, or when someone stands up, you have to ask to use the restroom. You're used to just going from your living room to your bathroom at home, and that was literally me. Everything was so foreign to me, and I remember I had a lot of anxiety at first. I went in when I was 10 in 5th grade, and but the upside to having been homeschooled was my parents had a really close-knit group of friends, and we did a lot of really cool field trips. Like growing up in the D.C. area, we would go to New York or Philadelphia or like where the Battle of Williamsburg was, or, all these historic cool things. So there was definitely upsides, but I've always been social, shocker. And so I missed kind of the social side of it. And even in our tiny little group of homeschoolers, I was like, I crave that. I want to make friends. I want to experience school. And luckily my parents were supportive. So
I love that. Well, there you go. Like I said, I don't know much about homeschooling, so I was like, we need to talk to Sarah about this. Let's talk a little bit more about school in the sense that, did you know that you always wanted to go into journalism? Was that something that you were like, you know what, from the day I was born until I'm sitting here now, I knew I wanted to do this?
Yes, from a pretty young age. I think when I was 5, I wanted to be like a marine biologist, which seems like a really popular profession that 5-year-olds, I feel like, say they want to do. But my dad, he worked in the news. He was a news producer. He just retired for National Public Radio for like literally 50 years. And so I had that kind of as a example. And I always, once I was in school, I started out homeschooled, all I did was read books. Always been terrible at math, and all I did was read. And when I went in and I learned to write, I was just always scribbling away and writing stories, and I wrote books. I say that with quotes. But
I was going to say, you guys can't see her, but when she said she writes books, she definitely had air quotes.
Yes, busted out the air quotes. So I knew I wanted to somehow be creating stories or telling other people's stories, and I wasn't sure exactly what, in what capacity, but I got into University of Maryland, actually had my dorm. They have a great journalism program. And then, like I said, like 2 weeks before I was slated to go in, I had also applied to ASU, a couple places. And I was like, I just want to go there. And they have a great journalism program too. Yeah. So studied broadcasting, went out there. I'm not going to lie and say that like the surrounding area wasn't a huge draw though. I definitely wanted the social and like I said, you know, the different vibe from where I grew up. But I studied it, and I'm glad. I feel lucky. A lot of people don't know what the heck they want to do.
I say this all the time. I don't know about you, but I feel like every morning I get up and I get to come do this job. Yes. I'm actually excited to go to work.
Yes, and not everyone can say that, you know? Like a lot of people either take longer finding exactly what they're passionate about, or unfortunately, I feel like some people just never find that. And I feel like we are so fortunate to be able to every single day go into this job that we love and have fun with.
I am going to tease Sarah a little bit because she told a story a few podcasts ago that she had a crush on a guy who was, what was he in? He was in political science.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And so we might have lost Sarah to politics for a minute there because she got really deep into those Facebook statuses.
Yeah. You guys have to go back and listen to that. But yeah, we were talking about like weird things we've done for crushes. This guy was a poli-sci major, I think going on to law school. And I definitely did some cringy, like, you know, posting that I was, you know, watching CNN when I wasn't. And
so we could have lost Sarah to the political science major, but I'm so glad that she kept true to herself.
I stayed true, yes.
The storyteller that she is. So let's talk about your career path, because honestly, for those of you who don't follow Sarah on Instagram, A, you should, but B, you have done so many cool things. Like you've been at this fashion show, and you went to Monaco at one point, and you write for this magazine. Like you are like, your career path is what dreams are made of for many people. Let's talk about the path that you kind of took.
Thank you. You're so kind. My path was not linear. I went to college and I studied journalism, but actually I graduated right after the crash in like 2009. Mm-hmm. So like I know a lot of millennials can relate. It was tough. It was a tough job market. And so I actually worked in medical equipment sales, which is so far removed from what I studied for a couple years in my 20s. And it just wasn't my calling, you know, but
wasn't your cup of tea?
Wasn't my cup of tea. But it did I feel like any job you have, you know, I feel like maybe a lot of recent grads can relate in that even if you studied something specific and you go into it or something completely different, like that's the time to be trying out different jobs and figuring out what works for you and what resonates and, you know, what maybe you don't love. So I'm thankful for the time that I did that. And then it really solidified like, okay, no, I want to go back. I want to focus on broadcasting. So, my first TV market when I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try I had studied news specifically. Mm-hmm. So I worked in Laughlin, Nevada. I hosted a morning show there, and that was a one-woman band. I was my own MMJ, which means you're basically like shooting, you're writing stories, you're producing, all that good stuff.
Been there.
Yep. You know, Laura, absolutely. So, and then I anchor produced in Nebraska at an NBC affiliate. And then I moved to Vegas, and I kind of created my own brand called Blonde About Town. And that was when I decided I'm really going to intentionally make this shift from working in news to more kind of entertainment lifestyle, which I am more passionate about.
Yeah. So I have a question after hearing that story. You said something that I think is so great. I think lots of times when someone, you know, leaves high school or leaves college or whatever, they're like, I need to be in the job I want right away. What advice would you give to someone who probably is like, you know what, I do want to be in TV, but, you know, they're worried about going after their dreams. They're worried about getting the right job. Like, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I would say just really be persistent. Mm-hmm. Most of us don't have like a direct connection to maybe your dream position, but I think really just being persistent, putting yourself out there, not being afraid of the word no, which I know is easier said than done, but literally every single one of us have faced rejection in our lives, and being able to be resilient and keep that in mind when you do face the inevitable rejection, because unfortunately, we're all going to have that, you know? And if you are really passionate about a pursuit or a field that you want to go after, then don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. I've had people tell me that, you know, I don't think you would be good in this role, or I see you in this role. And don't you love that unsolicited advice sometimes? But you can't listen to it. Yeah. And if you decide on your own that after you've pursued something that it isn't for you, that's completely different. But don't let someone else's opinions dictate the path that you take.
I think that's beautiful. You heard it right from Sarah's mouth. If you want something, you go for it, which is what our Sarah did. Let's talk about some of your career highlights, because I have my own highlights of your career. Oh, these are Alora's Sarah career highlights. I don't even know how to make that a sentence. So what are some of your highlights?
I just adore you. Career highlights was getting that first anchoring job. Like the first TV job I had, it was a cable affiliate. Like I said, I wore a lot of hats, and I was just literally didn't know what I was doing. I was just getting my feet wet. But actually being hired to be an evening anchor and producing, I was really proud of myself. And that was extremely exciting for me. And I felt like I have these people who have my back and obviously are trusting in me that I can do this job. So that was huge. And then going out on my own and making a decision. Like I said, like I was like, you know, news has been great to me, but if you watch this show, I'm like a huge pop culture person. And so I love entertainment and lifestyle and all that good stuff.
Sarah is the one we go to for everything. If we're like, Sarah, we heard that so-and-so is dating so-and-so. Can you tell us? Insert celebrity names there. And Sarah's like, well, here's the tea.
Like, when I'm on the treadmill, that's like what I watch is, you know, all that good stuff. Or I watch magazine or read magazines. I can't talk. But anyway, that was definitely a career highlight, anchoring. And then when I decided to develop Blonde About Town, I was like kind of throwing out all these different names. And I was like, if I'm just going to decide to create content on my own and be in the #1 capital for entertainment in the world, Vegas, you know, what's a good name that kind of is all encompassing? And so I started getting a lot of momentum and interviewing these entertainers there, but then COVID hit. So it was definitely a career highlight that I was excited about, but then, you know, sometimes things happen, like no one could have predicted COVID, and I know every industry was impacted.
I mean, that I look back on 2020, and I'm so proud of all of us for making it through that year. It was rough. How did you get to us at Fresh Living? How did you end up in Utah? How did you find out about Fresh Living? Because you've been all over the place.
Yeah, so with Blonde About Town, when I was based in Vegas before COVID and everything kind of lost the momentum, I was fortunate enough to we traveled over to Europe and kind of carried that brand, and I covered some really exciting things like the Cannes Film Festival, Formula One, the race in Monaco, which was incredible. We went to New York for Fashion Week, which was literally weeks before the world shut down. No one knew.
I'm glad I didn't know. I would have been.
No, can you imagine? I mean, it was rough and just a weird time. But so fast forward to kind of the midst of COVID, summer 21. There was an opening for Fresh Living, and I've never talked to you about this because we both essentially started like the same time.
Yeah, we did.
And I know that we were like both aware of this position and coming in, and like the process I'm sure was similar. But a friend of mine, or acquaintance rather, was he worked for Sinclair, and another girlfriend of mine who used to be an anchor with me in Nebraska, she kind of knew that I was putting my feelers out there. And I was like, you know, even though I've been doing this Blonde About Town, maybe I'll want to work for a station again. And so she just put me in touch with him. And he actually was the one that was like, well, in Salt Lake, they have this position for a lifestyle host. I don't know if this is of interest to you. And I was like, you're speaking my language. Like, of course, yes. And I applied. And I have a funny story about it is, whenever you go through the job application, a lot of times, whether it's Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, it's very formulaic. Like you put your resume and all this. Well, if you're in journalism or broadcasting, you have a reel, like a resume reel.
Yes.
So people who aren't familiar with the reel, you just put your link in. And so somehow I put my link in. It didn't work.
Oh.
And I was like, this is literally your calling card. You know, that's what their first impression of you is. You need it, especially for this type of job. And so I called sweet Geraldine, who is our HR person, and I was like, I just want to make sure that you guys got my reel. And she sent it to our EP, Mackenzie, and was like, I wanted to make sure that she got it. And so I like to think that was like, that call made a difference. And it kind of goes with what I said earlier, which is just be persistent, because I don't know if they would have ever seen.
I love it. Well, we are so happy to have you here, and I'm so happy we started at the same time.
I know.
I want to talk about something else that, man, you guys, Sarah is one of the bravest and strongest people I know. Let's talk about, if you are okay with this, let's talk about your work with eating disorders.
Yeah.
And the work you've done and why it's so important to you and what you would say to people out there who are struggling with something that you yourself struggled with, which she did a beautiful podcast on that. Go take a listen. But talk to us about that work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It makes me emotional to talk about, and I'm going to try not to be, but I was bulimic for 14 years. Mm-hmm. And it started after, again, I did a whole podcast about this, but basically in college I had a sexual assault, and I kind of spiraled. And so I didn't even realize or put the two together for years, but like through therapy and years later, and I don't think that was the only thing, but that was a big thing. Right. I kind of put two and two together, and I was like, okay, ever since after that happened, just that was my way of dealing, and it just kind of snowballed. So I'm in my late 30s now, but for I think 14 years, I was just really struggling with that hard. And so some years would be better than others, and then it was oftentimes stress-induced depending on what was going on in my life. Right. So yeah, it's something that I think the positive is we as a society are becoming a lot more aware of, and there's a lot more conversations going on.
So and people can get help.
Yes, and so many more resources, and I think it's so important because I think 1 in 4 women will experience an eating disorder in their lifetime, which is like a horrifying statistic.
And it's really high. I've been through something very similar.
Yeah, and we've talked, and I hope that people, if they're listening and they can relate, the takeaway would be, please know that there are resources out there, there's help. And like, I truly never thought there was a time I never thought I would be able to not be doing what I was doing every single day, which was living in hell. And through a lot of therapy and just like learning how to be healthy mentally and physically, I can't tell you the last time that I binged and purged. I wish I knew a date because I want to celebrate that date. Yeah. I know for certain, like, I haven't since I found out I was pregnant. I think it was before that, but I got pregnant in August of 21. And so I kind of celebrate that the past couple of years. I always think that in my head. I'm like, I'm celebrating my babies, but also it's a happy time, because the second I knew that I was carrying life, 2 lives, I was like, I will not hurt myself or, my babies, my unborn children. So
well, I think it is something that you said, that statistic is really high, and it is something that so many people go through, and it is something that I'm sure so many people are grateful for you to speak out and be like, hey, there is help, there is hope, and you don't have to be ashamed to ask for it.
Absolutely. It's so important. I hope people listen and that goes home, because I know that I even heard things like that before, and it took a long time to process, but literally there is hope out there. So,
and yes. Another kind of trial that you went through really fast before we wrap up is your girls. They did not come easy. You are an IVF warrior.
Yes. So during that COVID time I was talking about, where I had moved to Vegas, I was like, really trying to create and build this brand. Things were put on pause. And since I'd lived in Nebraska, I got married in September of 17, and I literally started my anchoring job after. So there were a couple years where like I wasn't getting pregnant, and my husband and I were like, at first not really worried about it, but then they were like, it's been a little while. So we decided to ultimately pursue IVF, and the timing ended up in a weird way being great with COVID, and we lucked out. We went through a fertility clinic. We opted to do in vitro, and we knew the likelihood because that's a whole other podcast, but we went out, we did the embryo implantation. We knew if we were going to do 2, there's a high chance we'll have 2, and we were so fortunate, and my twins are Hallie and Vienna, the best thing I've ever had.
And I love how open you talk about how you are with that too, because that's another struggle that many women have, and sometimes they don't feel seen, and they're like, why is this so hard? Is there something wrong with us? We could talk about Sarah all day. But
all of us. I know. I think we've talked about me. No, it's so weird, like I said, from the get-go. And I love the fact that all of the hosts on Fresh Living and Fresh Off the Set, I adore you guys, and you're all really interesting people, and Yeah, enough about me.
Well, there you go. Now you have met our sweet, brave, and strong Sarah. Okay, Sarah, before we wrap up, you know how we do. I'm going to give you our Fresh Five.
Oh, I love it.
So
okay.
for those of you who are just, tuning in for the first time, the Fresh Five is essentially we ask a lot of our guests at the end of podcasts just 5 random questions. They're not really hard hitting. They're not going to change the world, but it's just so that you can get to know our guests a little bit more.
Love it.
Okay, Sarah, number 1. What is a song that you can listen to over and over and over again and never get sick of it?
Whitney Houston, I Want to Dance with Somebody. Love that.
I feel like that's fair. And I feel like that's such a summer song.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm in that summer mood right now. I'm just like, it was a long winter, we all know, and I'm just like wanting to blast that music.
I mean, if you were here listening to this outside of Utah, we had like 5 winters. We thought it would be over, then snow would come. Anyway, I digress. All right.
So we'll be playing that all summer.
Number 2, what is your I know this answer, but not everyone does. What is your favorite holiday?
Oh, it's Cinco de Mayo.
I knew it.
I mean, followed closely by Christmas, but Cinco, yep.
Sarah loves, well, you love fall too.
I do pumpkin spice. I love Halloween. Okay, Halloween's probably number 2, but Cinco's still number 1.
See, that's what I was like.
Yep.
If I know my Sarah like I think I do, Cinco de Mayo's 1 and Halloween is 2.
Those are tough, head to head. My best day ever would be having a Halloween party with tacos.
Oh.
Maybe we can do that this fall.
There you go. All right, number 3. You are so into pop culture, you know everything. We go to you. I mean, we go to our producer a lot for reality TV show information, but we go to you for everything else. If you could interview one celebrity, who would it be?
Oh gosh, that's so hard. Zendaya? I'm probably saying, am I saying her name wrong? Zendaya or Zendaya? I've heard both. Well, I just adore her. The Greatest Showman is one of my favorite movies. Red Carpet. I know we both love the fashion, and she's just flawless.
She is one of the most beautiful people I have ever seen in my life. Every time I see a picture of her, whether she's walking the red carpet, whether she's just, on set, I'm always like, that woman is stunning.
Yes, I agree. And going off the Greatest Showman theme, Zac Efron was my crush forever.
See, I'm surprised you didn't say Chris Hemsworth, because I know how you feel about him.
I know. That's a tough one. You're giving me all these ideas. I want to interview them all. Just come on fresh off the set. We will talk to you guys all. It'll be a great show.
We're here and we're ready. Okay, number 4, what is a quote that you live by?
You know what? I keep a diary, and I'm a big reader. I read at night a couple chapters before I go to bed. I try almost every night. Not just motivational. I read everything, fiction, mystery. But whenever I come across a quote that I like, I write it down. So I don't have one mantra, but never give up, be resilient, be persistent. I love the golden rule, which is treat others how you'd want to be treated. I think that just everyone should ascribe to that and live by that. Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, number 5, and your last question. We didn't talk too much about this, but Sarah played field hockey back in the day. So if you were in the Olympics, I do not believe field hockey is an Olympic sport. I could be wrong. But if you were in the Olympics, winter or summer, which sport would you want to compete in? And you're automatically amazing.
Oh, okay.
That's
well,
part
that
of it.
is a game changer, because I was going to say I always wanted to be this beautiful, graceful ice skater, and I'm the opposite of all of that on the ice. If you've ever seen me, but if we're in a pretend world, then is it a sport?
So
okay, field hockey is a sport.
Yeah, Megan just told us.
An Olympic sport. But I think I'd still would want to do the ice skating, because it's so out of my wheelhouse. And
I love it. For those of you who follow our TikTok, every single time we do a dancing TikTok, Sarah's like, do I have to be in this? Can I step aside? But she's always great.
I'm game, you know what? Because you and Carrie and Brooke are all great. And David, I mean, honestly. But we have so much fun with it. I just, on an alternate universe, I'd love to be a good dancer or graceful.
There we go. Well, Sarah, it was such a joy talking to you. We loved getting to know you more. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe, and we will catch you next time.
Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.